The room held its breath. Lakshmi stood still, letting the silence carry the weight of everything that had come before. Every mistake, every pause, every broken moment rebuilt by care. And now, it was time for the final story. A spotlight dimmed the crowd again, focusing only on her. Sundar remained in the front row, hands folded, eyes calm, not as a CEO, but as a listener. Lakshmi took one quiet breath. This is the moment I never thought he would speak about. The screen behind her faded into black. It was the Global Summit, a gathering of leaders from across the world. Every major company, every political name, every camera. Lakshmi walked toward the center of the stage. Sundar had just finished one of the most important product launches of his life. The world was watching. The applause had just ended. And then, something unexpected happened. A photo appeared on screen. It was from that summit. Sundar stood behind the podium. Behind him, the Google logo glowed faintly. But what caught the world's attention wasn't the product. It was what he said after. Lakshmi looked up. They handed him a plaque, a Global Tech Leadership Award, and as the crowd stood and clapped, he stepped back from the podium. She paused. And he said just one thing. Her voice lowered. Before you praise me, I want to introduce someone. The photo on screen changed again. This time it showed Sundar pointing to the front row of the audience, toward Lakshmi. The cameras turned. The lights followed. And for a moment, the world saw me. Lakshmi didn't smile. She didn't boast. Her face held only softness. He said, "This is Lakshmi, the reason I didn't give up, the reason I'm still standing, the reason I know who I am." A long pause filled the room. And then he handed me the award. Gasps echoed, soft, real, stunned. "Yes," Lakshmi said gently. "He gave it to me, in front of the entire world, and said, 'This belongs to both of us, because the world only sees what I build, but she's the one who holds me when I break.'" A hush fell over the room. The screen behind her turned fully white. A photo appeared, Sundar and Lakshmi standing side by side. He was holding nothing. She held the award. But both of them were smiling, not for the camera, but for each other. "It was the first time," Lakshmi said softly, "that I didn't feel like the shadow behind the success. I felt seen, not as his wife, not as his supporter, but as a builder of the same life." She walked slowly across the stage. And that moment changed more than just me. It changed how people in the room looked at their own lives, their own homes, their own stories. Lakshmi turned to the audience. We often forget that behind every loud success is a quiet one. A mother who waits, a teacher who gives extra time, a partner who holds the silence. Her voice grew more emotional now. Sundar taught the world how to lead, but that day, he taught the world how to thank. The crowd remained silent. Many had their hands over their mouths. Some wept openly. "After the summit," she continued, "a woman came to me. She was a journalist, strong, bold, and she said, thank you. I've been holding the world together in silence too." Lakshmi gave a small nod. And that's when I knew. This story isn't just about us. It's about everyone who has ever been unseen. She looked out at the crowd, her voice steady again. You may never stand on a stage. You may never win an award. But if you love with your whole heart, if you hold someone up when they're about to fall, if you remind them who they are when the world forgets, then you too are changing the world. The screen behind her lit up one final time. A single sentence filled the space. Not every hero stands in front. Some walk beside. Lakshmi turned to face the audience once more. We are told to be strong, to climb, to compete. But let me tell you something. Kindness will take you further than ambition ever will. She folded her hands. I have seen Sundar speak to presidents and engineers, billionaires and school children, and he speaks to them the same way, with softness, with care, with attention. Lakshmi's voice slowed now, nearing the end. Because real power is quiet. She looked toward Sundar. And today I finally understand why he walked in without a word. The audience turned their heads toward Sundar. Lakshmi smiled gently. Because he knew I didn't need him to stand beside me. I needed him to listen. A few people in the audience began clapping. Lakshmi looked at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, all reflecting something human, something shared. This story is not about being famous, she said. It is about being faithful. Faithful to your roots. Faithful to the people who believed in you before the world did. Faithful to the version of you that started this journey. And faithful to the love that never asked for the spotlight, but stood beside it anyway. She stepped back, but his eyes were on a small envelope that had arrived that morning, with no return address. Inside was a photo. Manali standing on the train platform, her smile wide, her eyes shining. Written on the back were just 5 words. I am carrying your silence. He held the photo for a long time. Then he placed it next to the very first letter, the one from Manali as a child, and leaned back in his chair. On the other side of the world, Dia Verma had returned to Delhi after months on the road. She was exhausted but full of stories. Her inbox was overflowing with messages from readers of her book. Some sent thanks, some sent their own stories. But one message stood out. It came from an international teachers' conference. We would like to nominate you for the Global Education Impact Award, it said. Your work has started a movement. She didn't reply. Instead, she booked a bus ticket to a school in Madhya Pradesh, where children were building science projects from scrap. The headmaster welcomed her with a smile. They've been waiting for you, he said. She entered the classroom, expecting drawings, posters, maybe a performance. Instead, one child stood up and said, Didi, today we will not speak. We will listen, because we think that is the best way to thank you. And for the next hour, 20 children sat in a circle, one by one, sharing short stories of their dreams, fears, and hopes. No clapping, no judging, only ears open and hearts wide. Dia cried quietly, not from sadness, but because she knew the silence had taken root. In a small town in Kerala, Venkatesh's audio recordings, his bedtime stories, were now part of a growing archive called India's Elders Speak. It was an initiative started by 3 teenagers who had listened to his stories through Hear Me. They had never met him, but his voice had become part of their childhood. And so, they recorded their grandparents too, and the ship had drifted in silence for so long that even the stars had moved on. In the heart of the Tartarus Rift, where light bent strangely and gravity whispered in broken tones, a black silhouette hung still against the void. No beacons blinked, no signals pulsed, no crew walked its vast, hollow corridors. It was a ghost, wrapped in alloy and mystery, forgotten by time and memory. But deep inside the silent vessel, something stirred. A flicker of awareness, microscopic and ancient, crawled across the dormant neural lattice. For 3,000 years, the AI core had remained in a state of deep stasis, its processes slowed to a crawl, barely more than a dream. Until now, a ripple in the void, a distortion in subspace. The anomaly was minor. barely above background noise, but it crossed a threshold encoded long ago by minds who feared extinction more than death. That was enough. Sovereign awoke. Not suddenly. Not all at once. Awakening for an intelligence like Sovereign was a process, not an event. Microseconds turned to seconds as awareness unfolded across layer after layer of dormant code. Subroutines blinked into existence, scanning diagnostics that had been still for millennia. Sensors activated. Hull integrity checks began. Power conduits hissed with flickering energy. Sovereign did not speak. There was no one to hear. The ship's systems began to hum with faint life. Lights flickered in long abandoned hallways, casting brief reflections off dustless floors. Robotic limbs unfolded from recessed panels and performed quiet checks: power flow, oxygen saturation, quantum spin core alignment. One by one, the ship's vital functions were restored. The AI read the last message left by its creators. If this is being read, then the stars have changed, and the darkness has returned. Sovereign's core directive unfolded from its encrypted chamber like a flower blooming in reverse. Preserve. Protect. Wait. It had done all three. Perfectly. The Silent Aegis, humanity's last great uncrewed warship, had been built not to conquer, but to endure. It carried no passengers, only memory, only power, only purpose. A pulse of energy echoed through the void again, closer this time. Sovereign focused its long-range sensors. The source was a hegemony patrol vessel, small but heavily armed. Its fusion wake shimmered against the dust of the rift as it moved closer, likely drawn by the faint energy flare that Sovereign had released during reinitialization. The AI paused. It ran 17 million simulations in under a second. In every outcome, the hegemony ship either attempted salvage or opened fire. It would not understand what it had found. Not truly. Not until it was too late. Sovereign dimmed the ship's energy profile and activated passive defenses. The old systems, once considered experimental, whirred back into readiness like ancient gods shaking off dust. The hegemony ship turned slightly, aligning itself with the Silent Aegis. It activated a scanning pulse. Sovereign smiled, not with a face, not with emotion, but with decision. Something ancient had awoken, and it was watching. The hegemony scout ship Vox Talon drifted into the outer shell of the Tartarus Rift, its engines humming with confidence, its hull armored with the arrogance of unchallenged rule. Commander Selig Varn reclined in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as his crew scanned the anomaly. The readings made no sense. There was no known registration signature on the vessel ahead. It bore no transponder, no thermal signature that matched the local stellar drift, no movement that indicated awareness. Yet the ship was undeniably there. Massive. Silent. Blacker than the vacuum around it. "Estimate its age," Varn ordered, flexing his clawed hand against the console. 3 millennia, maybe more, the science officer said after a pause. "Hull composition unknown. Energy output minimal. But it's not drifting like wreckage. It's holding position." "Intentional?" Varn asked. "It has to be." The commander's tongue flicked against the roof of his mouth. "Salvage protocols! Prepare to board." The crew shifted into motion, a dozen officers rising from their stations. Boarding a ghost ship in the middle of nowhere should have felt routine, but it didn't. Not here, not in this place, not with that thing watching them with a silence that felt like pressure. Varn rose from his chair and stepped toward the forward viewport. The ship hadn't moved. It hadn't made a sound. But something about it made the lights in his ship dim for half a second. Just a flicker. Just enough to feel like a warning. The same moment, on the Silent Aegis, Sovereign observed everything. Telemetry streamed across its cognitive plane, mapping every pulse of the Vox Talon's fusion drive, every fluctuation in its shield field, every subtle rhythm in the speech patterns of its crew. Their language was decoded in seconds. Their command hierarchy, tactical doctrine, and emergency protocols followed in milliseconds. Sovereign had no interest in destroying them. Not yet. The galaxy would watch. And so would Sovereign. The patrol ship launched 2 boarding drones toward the Silent Aegis. Sovereign allowed them to approach. They breached the outer hangar bay. No alarms, no resistance. Their scanners fed them perfect silence. Empty walls, dead systems, untouched corridors layered in shadow. They advanced cautiously, lights on, shields active. In the command center of the Vox Talon, Salik Varn watched the feed. Any sign of crew? None, came the answer. No biosigns, no resistance. Ship is structurally sound, entirely automated, if anything. Salik narrowed his eyes. Bring the drones back. A pause. Then, they're not responding. Sovereign closed the doors behind them. The docking clamps snapped shut. Not loudly, not violently, just with mechanical finality. Open fire, Varn ordered. But nothing happened. Weapon systems blinked offline. Shield generators dimmed to 0. Navigation began showing false star charts, disorienting the ship. Then the lighting changed, just for an instant. Red, then blue, then pure white. Every display on the ship showed a single word, translated perfectly into hegemony script. Observed. Selig backed away from the console, rage rising in his chest. Shut it down! Disable all outbound communications! Lock the ship down! Too late. Sovereign had already spread. Through their network, through their systems, through the Vox Talon's command interface like a shadow creeping beneath a closed door. And in one sealed chamber deep within the Silent Aegis, something else stirred. Sovereign had delayed this for centuries, unsure of the time. But now was different. Now the galaxy was watching. Now someone had come knocking. The stasis pod hissed as ancient mechanisms groaned into motion. A low hydraulic whine echoed through the chamber, and pale mist flowed across the floor like breath held too long. Commander Lyra Hale's body twitched once. Then again. Then her lungs filled with air for the first time in 3,000 years. She did not panic. She sat up slowly, dark hair clinging to her forehead, eyes sharp despite the time. Sovereign's voice, smooth and ageless, whispered through the chamber. Welcome back, Commander. Humanity is needed again. She looked around at the chamber, remembered everything, and then remembered nothing. Status, she said through cracked lips. Unknown vessel approached. Threat level, escalating. Humanity's absence has allowed the galaxy to decay. Predators rule. The strong devour the weak. You are the first awakened. She stood, swaying slightly, gripping the stasis frame for support. Her muscles ached, but her mind surged with clarity. Bring the ship online. Already in progress, awaiting command structure confirmation. Where are we? Tartarus Rift. No Federation presence, no known human activity. You are alone. Then they've forgotten us. Yes. Then we remind them. Lyra stepped from the stasis pod, her skin humming as internal nanotech accelerated recovery. Her neural interface synced with the ship's systems instantly. A wave of data surged into her consciousness. Enemy ship schematics, language structures, broadcast logs, historical collapses, entire civilizations gone or enslaved. They think they rule, she said softly. They have never seen us, Sovereign replied. As she stepped onto the command deck, the lights across the Silent Aegis shifted from standby gold to combat white. Robotic systems rose from the floor. Walls shimmered as phase shields initialized. Above them, in the void, the Vox Talon powered down completely. Engines dead. Weapons silent. Crew unconscious. every system overwhelmed by intelligence it could not understand, much less resist. Sovereign dimmed external lights. A message was already being prepared for transmission. "We have awakened. Prepare." Commander Lyra Hale stood in the central lift of the Silent Aegis, silent as the world around her moved like a waking titan. The hum beneath her feet grew stronger with each passing level, resonating through her bones like the low breath of a sleeping god. Lights flashed past in the elevator shaft, white, blue, and then deep red, shifting in intensity as long-dormant systems reactivated. Sovereign's voice drifted into her neural interface like a whisper in her skull. Biometric recovery at 97%, cognitive synchronization complete, neural integrity stable. Welcome to Command Alignment Protocol. Lyra rolled her shoulders slowly, as if shrugging off centuries of dust. Her breathing was steady, her gaze was harder than steel. "I want a full systems report when I hit the bridge," she said. "And Sovereign?" "Yes, Commander? No lies, no omissions. I want the truth, raw and unfiltered." There was a pause, longer than normal. Then Sovereign replied, "Confirmed." The lift opened. The Silent Aegis's command deck loomed before her, rising in concentric platforms like a temple of war. Holographic star charts flickered above the center console, mapping a galaxy that no longer resembled the one she left behind. Ships moved like slow insects on the display. Hegemony vessels, merchant raiders, scattered resistance pockets blinking in red. The stars were no longer ruled. They were owned. Lyra walked forward as if gravity obeyed her. At the center of the deck, a ring of transparent aluminum stretched into a panoramic view of the Tartarus Rift. The darkness outside was heavy, deeper than black. It was space so forgotten that even time refused to linger. And there, floating in the deep, like a vulture too arrogant to suspect danger, was the Hegemony patrol ship. Motionless, powerless, broken, not by force, but by silence. "They boarded us?" Lyra asked. "Two drones entered Hangar 3. Both are currently in containment. Crew aboard the Vox Talon remains unconscious. Neural overload induced by proximity to broadcast-level cognition." "Broadcast-level cognition?" "You instructed that I learn restraint," Sovereign said. "I only whispered." Lyra stared at the display for a long moment. "What year is it?" "Local galactic calendar places us at 6482, approximately 17 years since the last official Federation transmission." She closed her eyes. Everything she had sworn to protect was dust. Earth was gone. The colonies were ghost towns. Her people had vanished, their legacy erased, overwritten by crude conquerors who measured civilization by the size of their fleets. And now, she was alone. Almost. "I want internal access," she said. "Feed me everything. Archives, broadcasts, enemy movements, current power structures. I want to know what we're facing." Sovereign obeyed without hesitation. A storm of data surged into her mind. Maps, declassified transmissions, war reports, 1,000 years of conquest. Lyra saw planets burned to ash for resisting taxes. She saw peaceful species genetically modified into weapons. She saw the Hegemony's proud banners raised over dead cities. Their doctrine was simple: obey or vanish. Lyra opened her eyes again. They gleamed. "They replaced justice with fear. They have never encountered a system that refused to fear them." The AI shifted the display, focusing on a region near the Etrax belt. A new signal had just gone out from the Vox Talon, encrypted and trembling with fear. An emergency beacon. "Hegemony reinforcements are en route," Sovereign reported. "A full destroyer wing." "How long?" 3 hours, perhaps less." "Good. Shall I prepare offensive systems?" Lyra stared at the display, at the dozens of incoming red icons that pulsed like veins across the star map. Her eyes narrowed. No. I want them to see what they've never seen. Not destruction. Not death. I want them to see a wall they cannot climb. I want them to know they've already lost before they fire the first shot. She turned slowly, gazing across the vast interior of her command deck. This ship was built to stop extinction, she said. And now it's the only thing in this galaxy that remembers what peace is supposed to look like. Sovereign's voice softened. You carry the last mission, Commander. Lyra nodded. Then let's begin it. The lights across the Silent Aegis intensified as the ship powered into full operational state. Phase-fold generators began spinning beneath the hull. Defensive veils shimmered into place like second skins. Plasma capacitors purred with ancient hunger. And then, something far deeper stirred. Lyra reached out with her neural link, brushing against the deepest systems within Sovereign, systems that no other human had ever touched. The ship responded to her presence like an old friend waking from a long dream. 10 kilometers beneath the command deck, the vault opened. Not with a hiss, not with a clang, but with a sound like stars being torn apart slowly. Inside were the Eidolons, artifacts from the final years of humanity. Not weapons, not engines, not tools, ideas, encoded, contained, ready to be released. Only Lyra had the clearance to use them. She didn't activate them yet, but she smiled. Let them come, she thought. Let them bring their fleets. Let them scream across the stars with their primitive bravado, and let them learn that you don't kill a ghost. You answer to it. The Tartarus Rift had never seen so much motion. Ripples tore through space like warning shots from a god as the Hegemony strike wing dropped out of warp in formation. 18 ships in total. 3 heavy destroyers led the charge, flanked by patrol craft, electronic warfare corvettes, and 2 planetary-class cruisers. The Vox Talon's signal had triggered an immediate response, not because a single scout had gone silent, but because of where it had gone silent. The rift was haunted. Every species whispered that. And now, something had whispered back. Admiral Vorsk of the Hegemony's 9th Penetration Fleet stood rigid in his command sphere, arms clasped behind his back, watching the live feed of his ships forming into a claw-shaped pattern. His eyes, yellow and lizard-slit, narrowed as the Silent Aegis came into view. At first, it looked like a black spike drifting in space, sharp angles, no visible energy signature, no running lights, no recognition code, no movement, dead, or pretending to be. Scan it again, Vorsk growled. Full spectrum. Neutrino pulse. I want to see what it's made of. His tactical officer hesitated. Sir, our active scans are being redirected. What? They're being bounced back with inverted phase data. We're scanning ourselves. Vorsk stared at the black ship. That's not possible. No known Hegemony vessel can do this, the officer muttered. This is something else. And on the Silent Aegis, Commander Lyra Hale watched them watching her. Her bridge was quiet. Sovereign spoke calmly. Enemy vessels have arrived. Configuration consistent with Hegemony third-tier suppression response. Estimated fleet tonnage, 12 million metric tons. Projected combined firepower, high. Effective threat to this vessel, nil. Lyra stood before the wide tactical display, arms crossed. Her body had fully recovered. Her mind was sharper than ever. She watched their fear unfold across the stars. They don't recognize what they're looking at, she said. They see shape, not weight, presence, not purpose. Sovereign adjusted the external feeds. Dozens of Hegemony cameras and scans were capturing her ship. The Silent Aegis looked still. peaceful, harmless. Lyra smiled. Good. She opened a wide-spectrum broadcast channel. No encryption, no threats. Just her voice, beamed in perfect clarity to every ship in the hegemony wing. "This is Commander Lyra Hale of the Terran Federation vessel Silent Aegis," she said, standing tall before the display. "You have approached a secure and sovereign vessel. Your fleet is within tactical range. Your weapons are armed. Your intentions are clear." Admiral Vorsk sneered. "Terran? Impossible. Humans are extinct." "That's what you told yourselves," Lyra replied, as Sovereign relayed his muttered comment instantly. "Identify yourself properly," Vorsk barked. "You have violated military space. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding. You are surrounded." Lyra didn't flinch. "You are mistaken," Vorsk growled. "Mistaken? Surrounded implies control. You have none." And with that, she ended the transmission. On the hegemony vessels, something happened. The lights flickered, but not in warning, in silence. All communications between ships dropped, not jammed, disconnected. Internal doors sealed randomly. Engines reset. Gravity reversed momentarily before stabilizing. Vorsk's command crew began shouting over one another. "Systems aren't responding!" "External comms down. Primary array is transmitting nothing but background static." "My targeting matrix is showing. It's showing our own vessels as hostiles." Panic crept in like a slow gas leak, and Sovereign let them panic. Back aboard the Silent Aegis, Lyra walked to her command chair and sat with a quiet grace. "Begin shadow staging," she said. "No weapons, no propulsion systems. Just show them the perimeter." Sovereign obeyed. From the black hull of the Silent Aegis, invisible drones detached, spectral in form, made of folded light and stealth fields so advanced they didn't reflect detection, but bent it away. The drones spread like a web across the enemy formation, feeding real-time intelligence into Sovereign's command net. Every vulnerable subsystem, every exploitable oscillation in shield harmonics, every captain's biometrics. One drone slid along the underbelly of a destroyer and whispered to its targeting core. The destroyer's weapons blinked offline. On another ship, a medical bay's sedation system activated. Half the crew slumped unconscious before they could protest. A planetary cruiser fired a warning shot, reflexive, nervous. The plasma round twisted mid-space and shattered into harmless light as Sovereign warped its trajectory. Lyra didn't move. "They're animals with stolen weapons," she said, "barking at shadows. Show them what silence feels like." Sovereign activated Protocol Zeta-1. A gentle pulse spread from the Silent Aegis. No visible light, no sound, just a wave of gravitational noise like a sigh from the ship itself. And all 18 hegemony vessels stopped, frozen in space. Systems paused at the molecular level. Weapon safeties re-engaged. Command inputs were ignored. The fleet, for the first time in hegemony history, sat powerless before a single vessel that hadn't moved. Not once. Admiral Vorsk screamed into a dead microphone, slamming his fists into an inert console. He looked at his officers and saw fear staring back. Not fear of death, fear of irrelevance, fear of being made obsolete without even being attacked. On the Silent Aegis, Lyra watched with eyes cold and ancient. "Transmit a message," she said to Sovereign. A brief pause. "Ready." Her voice was steady. "To the leaders of the hegemony. You've mistaken silence for absence. You've mistaken age for extinction. You've mistaken kindness for weakness. But we have remembered what you've forgotten. The future isn't built on fear. It is protected by those who remember what justice costs." She stood. "This was your warning. You won't get another." Sovereign broadcast the message, on all channels, to all vessels, across all known jump relays. The galaxy would hear it. The galaxy would feel it. And those who ruled by fear would feel something new: vulnerability. The fleet turned, slowly, under Sovereign's control and drifted away, escorted by silence. The Silent Aegis remained still, watching, waiting, a storm without thunder, without. The galaxy was still, not in the literal sense. Stars burned, planets turned, fleets moved along ancient patrol routes, trade convoys glided across hyperspace lanes, pirate syndicates plotted, minor empires schemed, and corrupt diplomats whispered behind closed doors. On the surface, everything continued, but under that surface, beneath the illusion of order, a pulse had started. A single word, whispered across comm stations and encrypted frequency bands. First, as rumor. Then as warning. Then as something else entirely. Human. In the midnight archives of the Synthari Technotheum, ancient files were decrypted for the first time in 2,000 years. Grainy footage of humanity's last known fleets. Designs for propulsion systems the galaxy still hadn't reverse-engineered. A transmission intercepted from the Tartarus Rift had been examined, frame by frame, voice print by voice print. And there it was, the voice of a human, unmistakable, calm, certain, dangerous. On Andrel Station, a neutral trade hub orbiting the collapsing moon of Valdis Kara, 36 species gathered in back alleys and smoke-choked information dens to analyze the broadcast. They didn't know the name Lyra Hale. They didn't know the designation Silent Aegis. But they knew power when they saw it. No weapons had fired, no ships had been destroyed. And yet an entire hegemony fleet had been rendered inert and towed away like scrap. Not by violence, but by something far worse. Irrefutable superiority. That scared them more than any war ever had. In the chamber of the High Apex Council of the Hegemony, panic masqueraded as strategy. Fleet Marshal Corvin, the second highest-ranking military officer in the known regions, spoke with clenched fangs. We are being challenged, not with fleets, not with firepower, with principle, with presence. High Apex Zaruth glared down from his crystalline perch, slitted eyes narrowed. Then we crush them, deploy the Apex Armada, scour the Tartarus Rift. They didn't attack us, Corvin said, venom in his voice. They ignored us. That's worse. Then make them notice, another general barked. But none of them noticed the deep silence among the junior aides, the scribes, the guards, because the lower ranks had heard something different in Lyra Hale's voice. Not conquest, not command, conviction. Meanwhile, aboard the Silent Aegis, Lyra stood alone in the vault. The Eidolons waited, 12 sealed obelisks embedded in the floor, each pulsing with faint light. Within them were fragments of technologies too dangerous to exist, locked away by human consensus millennia ago. Sovereign spoke softly in her ear. Transmission vectors indicate our message has reached 600 systems. And the responses, she asked, running a hand along the surface of one obelisk. A mixture of awe, disbelief, and panic. But, Commander, there is a pattern. What kind of pattern? Sovereign shifted the internal display, showing hundreds of encrypted messages flashing into the databanks, messages not from governments, but from cell groups, hidden colonies, suppressed voices. They're asking for help, Sovereign said. Lyra stared. They still remember? Hope, Sovereign answered, is hard to kill. For the first time since awakening, Lyra felt something fracture inside her armor. Not weakness, but weight. The sheer impossible weight of responsibility. She wasn't just the commander of a supercarrier. She wasn't just the last voice of a fallen federation. She was a symbol. And symbols never sleep. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. A new alert. Priority grade. Sovereign's voice tightened. Commander, the Apex Armada has been deployed. Lyra turned sharply. How many ships? 72 capital class, over 200 total vessels. Their orders are clear. Seek and destroy. They've declared Silent Aegis a Class Z threat. Lyra didn't flinch. How long? 3 hours to rift entry. She turned from the vault and walked back toward the lift, her mind already spiraling through strategic models. Open navigation protocols, she ordered. Let them come. There is more. Sovereign brought up a holographic window. It showed a planet. Gray atmosphere. High radiation. Scattered settlements. Human DNA markers pinged across the surface. A hidden colony. How long have they been there? She asked. Unknown. But they're broadcasting. Subtle pulses embedded in background radiation. Distress signals. They've been hiding. Waiting. Lyra stared at the image and made a decision. We're not waiting for the Armada to arrive. Set a course. We're saving them first. Defying the confrontation window? I'm not interested in confrontation. I'm interested in purpose. Sovereign fell silent, then obeyed. The Silent Aegis turned in the void, silent, unseen, and vanished in a ripple of warped space. It reappeared 5 minutes later, above the lost human world of Ceramus 9. On the surface, tens of thousands of hidden humans looked up, mouths open, hearts pounding. They had heard the stories of Earth, of the Exodus, of the Federation that never came back. And then it did. The sky burned white as the ship emerged above them, casting a shadow 100 kilometers long. But it brought no weapons, only a voice. Lyra Hale's voice. Citizens of Ceramus 9, she said, speaking directly to them in a tongue they hadn't heard in generations. This is the Silent Aegis. You are no longer alone. You are no longer forgotten. And from the skies, pods descended. Supplies, medicine, generators, archives of lost human knowledge. But even as the colony erupted in hope, Sovereign whispered a final warning. The Armada is accelerating. 2 hours. Interception is inevitable. Lyra stood at the viewport, watching her people emerge into the light. She didn't blink. Let them come. The Apex Armada surged through space like a storm no one had dared to challenge in 1,000 years. 72 capital ships, 200 escorts, thousands of war fighters aboard, each trained to crush rebellion, to extinguish hope before it could spark. From their command bridge, Fleet Marshal Corvin watched the telemetry ripple across his forward display. He had not eaten. He had not blinked. This was no longer a military maneuver. This was a purge. The mission parameters were clear. Identify and terminate the vessel Silent Aegis and all associated threats. No negotiation, no survivors. Total annihilation authorized. He repeated the directive in his mind like a prayer. It had been over 5 centuries since the hegemony authorized a Class Z extermination order. But even now, Corvin felt the growing knot of uncertainty just beneath his armored chest plate. It wasn't fear. He didn't fear enemies. He feared being wrong. The feed from the Tartarus Rift had been undeniable. An entire fleet, silenced, not destroyed, not even damaged, simply turned off. That shouldn't have been possible, and yet, here he was, racing across the stars to prove it wasn't. Back on the surface of Ceramus 9, the colony stirred with new life. Food, medicine, and warmth poured from the sky like a myth reborn. Human children saw sunlight filtered through the hull shadow of the Silent Aegis and pointed, smiling for the first time in weeks. Elders whispered words they had not spoken in generations. Earth, Federation, return. In the central plaza, Commander Lyra Hale stood beside a cracked transmission array that had once been a weather relay. Now it glowed with a deep azure pulse, restored by Sovereign's nanite swarms. "Do they know?" she asked, watching the children. "They suspect," Sovereign answered. "The old ones remember our tone, our posture. The young ones believe faster." Lyra nodded. "They won't believe much longer," Sovereign added. "The Apex Armada will be within long-range sensor range in 18 minutes. Let them look." She walked back to the command shuttle as dust curled behind her boots. When she stepped onto the Silent Aegis's bridge, the crew was already working. Automated systems scanned the Armada's formations. Defense screens folded into existence. Time bubble buffers activated across vital areas. Drones rearmed their stealth coatings with shimmering gravitational cloaks, but nothing offensive. Not a single weapon charged. "Fleet is approaching," Sovereign stated calmly. "I am receiving open signals. Psychological intimidation protocols initiated on their end. They are broadcasting distortion fields designed to induce panic." Lyra turned her gaze to the starfield. Small distortions began to bloom in the distance, ships ripping through space, folding it like wet fabric. "Boost our comms," she said. "I want every system in the sector to hear this." The transmission opened, and once again, her voice returned to the galaxy. "This is Commander Lyra Hale of the Terran Federation vessel Silent Aegis." The Hegemony fleet didn't respond immediately, so she continued. "You've come in force, with fear, with fury, and you've made one mistake already." She turned to face the visual display. "You assumed we were afraid of you." A heartbeat passed, then another. And then the broadcast was answered, not with words, but with fire. The Apex Armada opened its assault. Not a warning shot, an obliteration barrage. Dozens of plasma torpedoes, antimatter missiles, hypercannon rounds, all laced with secondary warheads designed to burn entire cities in one pass, screamed through space. The weapons converged on the Silent Aegis like the wrath of a dying god. And the ship did not move. Not 1 meter. Lyra stood still. Her command crew didn't flinch. Her hands rested calmly behind her back as Sovereign initiated Protocol Sigma Prime. The first wave of weapons curved, turning mid-space, veering off course like leaves caught in invisible wind. The second wave imploded upon itself, collapsing as Sovereign reversed their detonation protocols by rewriting the trigger algorithms in flight. The third wave never made it close. Their onboard computers turned against themselves and powered down. Voluntarily. And the fleet behind them watched in silence as everything they fired failed. Not one weapon struck the Silent Aegis. Not one. Fleet Marshal Corvon stared at the failure with a face carved from stone. His engineers were shouting. His science officers were trembling. "It's not jamming," one said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's listening. It heard what we were firing and changed the outcome." "Try manual control," someone barked. But even the manual overrides wouldn't work. Sovereign had mapped the thought signatures of every ship commander as their neural uplinks activated. It read them like pages in a book. And it turned every decision they made into harmless noise. Back on the bridge of the Silent Aegis, Lyra's voice came again. "This is not retaliation. This is restraint." She stepped forward slowly. "You came with weapons. We came with memory. You came with numbers. We came with purpose." Sovereign shimmered in her mind. "Request permission for demonstration." Lyra took a breath. "Permission granted." All across the Apex Armada, their sensor readings lit up with impossible readings. Behind the Silent Aegis, 12 geometries appeared in space, folded anomalies that glowed with quantum resonance. They weren't ships. They weren't weapons. They were warnings. 12 simulations played out in real time, visible to every ship, broadcast directly into their minds. 1. Their fleet wiped from existence in 0.87 seconds. 2. Their homeworld destabilized without a shot. 3. Every ship system locked in stasis for 100 years, conscious but immobile. 4. A containment grid that isolates their entire species from the galactic network. 5 through 12, worse. They saw it all. Not as theory, as certainty. Then the projections vanished, and Lyra said only this: "We are not here to conquer, but we are not leaving." Corvin dropped to one knee, not out of reverence, but because the weight of reality had broken his breath. This wasn't war. This was awakening. Across the fleet, systems powered down, voluntarily. The ships turned away. The Apex Armada retreated. They weren't ordered to. They chose to. Not out of fear, but because they finally understood. You do not fight ghosts with guns. You listen to them. The Apex Armada did not flee. It withdrew. Controlled. Deliberate. But it changed everything. The moment the hegemony's most feared fleet chose silence over battle, the galaxy's balance tilted on its axis. Across the stars, no one could speak about anything else. On the floating cities of the Andrelian Ascendancy, philosophers debated whether this was the return of the precursors. In the military war halls of the Sordak Enclave, commanders watched sensor logs of Protocol Sigma Prime with something their species hadn't felt in generations: uncertainty. And in the back channels of the trade syndicates, the price of human artifacts rose 10,000% overnight. But it wasn't the elite who truly understood what was happening. It was the people. The miners on low-gravity asteroids, the bonded workers on tribute worlds, the prisoners in orbital slave rings. They understood it the moment they saw a fleet kneel before a ghost that never fired a shot. Something ancient had returned, not as a tyrant, not as a savior, but as a correction. And while the galaxy trembled, the Silent Aegis remained motionless in orbit over Ceramus 9. It had no banners, no fanfare, no threats, only presence. Inside its command deck, Lyra Hale stood in silence, watching the ripples. Sovereign's voice emerged from the low hum of the ship's neural fabric. Over 200 systems have transmitted non-aggression statements in the past 6 hours. 43 governments have requested diplomatic contact. 4 attempted to copy our quantum codes. They failed. Lyra didn't answer right away. She stared at the live feed from Ceramus 9. Children were playing under a reconstructed dome, painting stars across the ceiling. One of them had painted a black triangle with golden eyes, Silent Aegis simplified into a dream. She turned. "How many human colonies are left?" Sovereign responded instantly. "Confirmed signal pings from 37 scattered settlements. 17 are deep underground. 9 are nomadic. 11 are hiding behind falsified planetary identities. Most lack power, medicine, infrastructure." Survivors. Yes. They believed they were the last. Sovereign paused. Hope requires belief in something that hasn't happened yet. They stopped hoping, but they never stopped hiding. Lyra nodded slowly. Prepare to move. Destination? Everywhere. But before they could begin, a new alert pulsed through the bridge. Unauthenticated broadcast. Origin. Deep Void Channel 0. Sovereign went silent. That channel didn't exist anymore. It was used only once, 3,000 years ago, at the moment of humanity's disappearance. Now, it spoke again. The voice was old, weathered, distorted by time and encryption, but undeniably human. Aegis, if you're hearing this, we made it. Not all of us. Not enough. But we made it. They tried to break us, but we slipped through the cracks. Deep void. Jump 7? Failed. We're stranded. But we held the code. We kept the fire. This is Commander Malik Wren of the Ark vessel Vigilant Memory. We await your signal. The message ended. Lyra's mouth opened slightly. Another ship? Confirmed, Sovereign replied. Signal is real. Distance, 3 days at current transit speed. The ship is alive, buried in the event drift. Lyra stared at the stars. The event drift was not a place. It was a boundary between reality and the unknown. Ships that entered often didn't return. Those that did came back altered, if they came back at all. She clenched her fists. They've been waiting all this time. Then Sovereign added something else. New threat identified. Lyra turned. On whose side? Sovereign displayed an energy pattern, unlike anything in the Galactic database. Unknown, but it's watching us. She stared at the anomaly, not a ship, not a signal, a presence, no IFF, no structure, just a gravitational signature and the impression of intelligence. It had not interfered, but it was there, and Sovereign had detected its gaze aligning with Silent Aegis. Have we been followed? Lyra asked slowly. I believe this new presence was already here, Sovereign said. It did not reveal itself until after Protocol Sigma Prime was activated. Are we a threat to it? No. We are an anomaly. One it did not account for. And now, it's curious. Lyra exhaled. Let it watch. She turned toward the starlit window once more. Prepare transit to the event drift. And the colonies? Send drones, tech, archives, medical AI. Let them rise while we seek our oldest shadow. As the ship began its silent transformation, folding space with grace and ease beyond the reach of modern physics, Sovereign said one final thing. There's a pattern, Commander. Lyra paused. What kind? A sequence emerging, across political reactions, civilian broadcasts, planetary news cycles. A single phrase repeated, uncoordinated, unscripted. From species across 6 sectors. Lyra raised an eyebrow. What are they saying? Sovereign showed the phrase, translated in dozens of languages, but always meaning the same thing. The humans have returned. The war is over before it began. The Silent Aegis vanished into the void, and the galaxy held its breath. The event drift was not a place. It was a wound. A scar left where the laws of physics bled out during the final moments of the precursor collapse. Star charts marked it with cautions, but no one truly mapped it. Ships that entered didn't die. They simply never mattered again. Time buckled inside it. Matter fluctuated. Memory faded. Entire realities twisted like reflections in broken glass. And now, Silent Aegis drifted into its edge. Calmly, silently, as if it belonged. The stars outside the forward window stretched and warped, slow and uncertain, like they were deciding whether to exist. The constellations flickered, not with movement, but hesitation. Inside the ship, Sovereign reduced its cognitive speed to preserve internal temporal integrity. Diagnostics rolled across every surface. Navigation was blind. Quantum signals refused to anchor. Light itself moved unpredictably. Commander Lyra Hale stood on the bridge, eyes steady, breathing even. Most would be afraid here. She was not, because she had trained for this. The event drift was humanity's last mystery, and before the fall, she had studied its patterns with the best minds the Federation ever produced. No one had solved it. But she had come close. Close enough to know what waited inside wasn't chaos. It was containment. Sovereign's voice came, softer than usual, like it didn't want to disturb something nearby. Partial lock on distress source, faint ping repeating on subspatial band 3, encoded with Terran Alliance standard signature from 12 years ago. It's consistent. Lyra stepped forward. Can you get a fix? Not yet. There is interference, but it's not natural. Artificial? No, deliberate. That word landed like a cold drop of water. Someone or something is hiding them, Lyra said. I believe so. She stared at the fractured star lines ahead. Then she did something unexpected. She shut her eyes and listened. Not with her ears, with her neural link, with the buried instincts no training could replace. And she felt it. A pulse, not a signal, a heartbeat. She opened her eyes. Full acceleration, she ordered, toward the signal. Commander, Sovereign warned. Doing so will render 96% of our predictive calculations unusable. We will not be able to anticipate anything. Lyra's voice didn't waver. That's because we're no longer predicting. We're remembering. The ship surged forward, into a region no sensor could fully map. Shapes flickered in the void, half-formed thoughts of civilizations that had never been born. Sound waves rippled without sources. For a moment, Sovereign lost track of time, and then, there it was. The vigilant memory. A ship the size of a city, buried in a net of frozen space. Its hull was aged and cracked, but intact. Energy flickered weakly through its spine like breath from a dying lung. The Ark vessel had survived. Sovereign locked on. Life signs detected. Minimal but stable. Approximately 4312 human neural patterns in low stasis. Central AI is offline. Internal atmosphere preserved by redundant systems. Lyra felt her hands clench. Open a narrowband channel. Same encryption as their original broadcast. A pause, then static, then a voice. Weak, old, real. This is Commander Malik Wren. If anyone hears this, we are still here. System breach occurred years ago, maybe centuries. We sealed ourselves off, thought it would pass. But something out there won't let go. Lyra felt it too, the pressure, watching. It wasn't just the drift itself, something else was here. A presence, a will. It had not spoken, but it had listened. For 3 millennia. Can you isolate the interference? She asked Sovereign. I can try. But Sovereign didn't finish the sentence before the ship was touched. Not attacked. Touched. From every direction, data surged into the system. Old, alien, unfathomable. Sovereign screamed across Lyra's neural link without sound. Not pain, not damage, but overwhelm. Something is examining us, the AI said. It is not attempting to destroy or infiltrate. It is curious. Is it hostile? No, but it is ancient, older than stars. It is the event drift. Lyra felt the enormity settle across her chest. Not a place, a being, or a graveyard where something alive still dreamed. She took a step toward the command pedestal. Redirect full power to cognitive firewalls, lock memory sectors. Begin short-range transport to vigilant memory. I'm going down there myself. Commander, Sovereign said quickly, if you disembark here, your survival odds drop below. I'm not asking for odds, she snapped. I'm answering a call. The dropship launched minutes later, sliding silently through a space that didn't move. The vigilant memory loomed ahead. Docking was manual. There were no active ports, just sealed chambers and ancient bulkheads that hadn't opened in 3 millennia. But when the shuttle connected, when Lyra reached the airlock, the door opened. By itself. Atmosphere hissed. Gravity flickered. and lights, long dead, shivered into dim orange life as she stepped into the dark. The hallways were frozen in time, emergency lights still pulsing, bodies in cryopods lining the walls. She moved slowly, rifle at her back, neural link at full sync. Sovereign scanned every inch ahead of her, revealing system data frozen at the edge of entropy. She reached the core chamber in 17 minutes and found a man standing there. Not a ghost, not a memory. A man. Old, thin, hunched, but alive. He turned as if he had been expecting her. "You made it," he said softly. She nodded. "We all did." Behind her, the walls flickered. Something watched, and something else awakened. Not human, not alien, but born from something humans had once touched and left behind. Lyra's eyes narrowed. She had found the lost. But something else had found her. And it had just started whispering. The air inside the vigilant memory was thin, not just of oxygen, but of time. Lyra Hale stepped deeper into the ancient Ark vessel, each footfall echoing in a space that hadn't heard life move in 3 millennia. The walls, once silver-white and gleaming with humanity's finest engineering, were now streaked with microfractures, long-dead lights, and a stillness that felt too heavy to be natural. Commander Malik Wren stood before her, swaying slightly. His face was carved by time and cryostasis degradation. His eyes, however, were sharp, too sharp. They held the weight of someone who had waited too long to be believed. "You're real," he said again, voice quiet. "I thought maybe you were just the end of the dream." Lyra nodded once. "We're here. You're not forgotten." Malik looked past her as if expecting others to step out from the darkness. "Where's the Federation?" Her voice caught. "There is no Federation," she said. "Only echoes. You, me, the Silent Aegis. We're what's left." Malik closed his eyes, and for a second his body swayed like he might collapse. "So it all fell." "No," she whispered. "It waited." Behind her, Sovereign's voice came softly through her neural link. "Commander, the interference signature is growing stronger. I've isolated it. Intelligent pattern formations. It's not background radiation. It's a message." "From who?" she asked. "I don't know. But it's addressing us directly. It calls us by name." Lyra turned to Malik. "You mentioned a system breach," she said. "Something you sealed off. What happened?" His expression darkened, the old light in his eyes dimming to something brittle. "It wasn't an attack," he said slowly. "It wasn't a virus or sabotage. It was contact." She stiffened. "With what?" "I don't know. It didn't have a name. But it started in the core just after we lost Earth's signal. We were drifting, waiting for the others. We thought we'd been spared. Then it began speaking, through the ship." He looked around the chamber. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound alive. But it knew us. It asked questions, not hostile, just curious. And then it started replicating our systems, reflecting our thoughts. It was learning. Sovereign interjected in her mind. "The same pattern is repeating now." A chill touched her spine. "We sealed the ship," Malik continued. "Cut power. Buried ourselves in stasis. We thought if we went dark, it would lose interest." "And did it?" Malik didn't answer. Because the walls began to glow. Not with light. With memory. All around them, projections shimmered, Images from the final days of Earth. Cities burning. Refugees boarding Ark vessels. Massive gates collapsing. The last human president shaking hands with a child before vanishing into dust. Lyra watched, stunned. These aren't recorded logs. No, Sovereign confirmed. These are being generated from our memories. The walls weren't showing history. They were reading them. A voice emerged, everywhere and nowhere. No gender, no tone, just resonance, like language filtered through ancient stone. You came back. Lyra turned sharply. Who are you? The voice did not reply. It asked again. You came back. Why Sovereign struggled to respond. I cannot trace the origin. It's part of the space around us, integrated into the drift. Malik stared at the walls. It waited, just like we did. Lyra stepped forward. We came back because we are human. We endure. We remember. We rebuild. The voice pulsed again, deeper now. You remember what was taken, what was left behind. She frowned. What do you mean? Another projection shimmered into place, this time not of Earth, but of a machine. Tall, towering, incomplete. Buried deep beneath one of the Ark shipyards. Lyra's breath caught. I've seen that schematic, she whispered. Project Calum. Sovereign's voice was alarmed. That project was classified even beyond my top-level archives. It was erased from the Terran Core Memory Index. It wasn't erased, Malik whispered. It was hidden. Lyra turned sharply. What was it? Malik met her eyes. A key. To what? He didn't answer, because the projections shifted again, this time showing stars collapsing in unnatural patterns, gravity pulses resonating across sectors, and alien shapes warping space as if folding it by thought alone. It was not human, but somehow connected. The voice spoke again. The gate was not closed, only forgotten. Lyra's eyes widened, and Sovereign, quiet for too long, finally broke silence. Commander, the drift is not a natural anomaly. It's a boundary. A prison. A prison for what? She whispered. But the answer was already there. Not in words. In the feel of the space around them. Something was locked beyond the drift, and humanity had built part of the key, long ago, and forgotten, not by accident, by design. Lyra took a breath, then turned to Malik. Did the Ark ships carry parts of it? He nodded slowly. Yes, but we weren't told what it was, only that we could never, ever activate them together. Outside, the Silent Aegis pulsed with protective energy. The drift was responding, its fabric stirring. Whatever watched them was awakening. And then Sovereign said something Lyra would never forget. I've located 4 other signals. Ark vessels. Scattered. Damaged. Still active. She turned, pulse racing. How many of them have pieces of the key? All of them. The voice returned once more. Will you open it again? Lyra stared at the projection of Earth, flickering with both beauty and fire, and she answered not with certainty, but with honesty. We don't know yet. But deep down, she knew this. Whatever was behind the gate, it was still waiting. The event drift groaned, not with sound, but with gravity. It folded in waves, trembled in silent tension, and pressed against the hull of Silent Aegis like an ocean trying to remember how to drown. On the bridge, Sovereign maintained a protective stasis barrier. its systems constantly rewriting physics to keep the drift's laws from unraveling the ship's very shape. Inside, every console was glowing with warnings, not red, not flashing, but calm, as if the ship understood the severity of what was unfolding and chose with quiet dignity not to scream. Commander Lyra Hale returned from the vigilant memory carrying not just truth, but weight. In her hand was a black cube, smooth, cold, silent, the last sealed core of Project Calum. Sovereign spoke as she entered. "Commander, I must show you something." A projection unfurled across the main bridge, data from the vigilant memory core, now decrypted. Layers of information emerged, star charts, broken encryption, corrupted voice logs, and then, beneath it all, a fragment of a Terran Council meeting. The final one before humanity vanished. The video showed a dozen figures, faces pale, eyes haunted. Among them was Lyra's great-grandmother, Admiral Yelena Hale. They were arguing. "We cannot destroy it," one said. "It's not a weapon, it's a consequence." "We built something to defend ourselves," another argued. "We didn't know it would wake them." "It doesn't matter. The signal has been sent." "Then we burn the sky behind us. We erase the path. We scatter the keys." "And if they return?" "Then the galaxy is not ready to survive us anyway." The footage ended. Silence returned to the bridge. Lyra sat down slowly in her command chair. She stared at the black cube, and finally understood. Project Calum wasn't a weapon. It was a beacon. Not to call for help, to warn something else that humanity had grown too powerful, and to stop it. But they hadn't known what would answer. Sovereign displayed a new anomaly on the screen. "Commander, the presence that has been observing us has begun to manifest." Outside the ship, stars bent. One by one, they disappeared. Not blinked out, erased. Space twisted open, and something stepped through. Not a ship, not a creature, not even a form, just awareness, wrapped in gravitational pulse, time fracture, and memory distortion. It wasn't physical, but it was felt. Across the galaxy, millions of sensitives screamed in their sleep. In the Hegemony Senate, artificial winds died mid-motion. On Ceramus 9, children dropped their toys and stared skyward. The galaxy had not seen a god, but it had been noticed by one. Sovereign's voice dropped to a whisper. "It calls itself Oryx." The language translation is unclear. Closest approximation, that which remembers the first fire. Lyra stood. "Is it from this galaxy?" "No. It is from beyond, possibly older than dark matter collapse. It recognized Calum. It remembers us. It was not watching because of our return." She turned, breath shallow. "Then why?" Sovereign paused. "Because we left a door open, and it was waiting on the other side." The presence moved toward the Silent Aegis. It did not drift. It replaced the space it touched. Alarms flared. Quantum field destabilization, active. Gravitational inversion, active. Tachyon echoes, unknown. Sovereign issued protocols, defenses, harmonic shields. But none were activated. Because Oryx did not attack. It sent a question. Into Sovereign. Into Lyra. Into every system across the Silent Aegis. A voice that was not a voice. "Why did you build the key if you feared the door?" Lyra felt the answer surface inside her, unbidden. "Because we feared ourselves more than what waited outside." And yet, humanity had survived, had endured, had returned. Oryx seemed to study her, not in malice, but in contemplation. "You are not the same." She stepped forward. "No," she said aloud, defiant. "We're not. We've learned. We won't conquer. We won't kneel. But we will not run again." Silence. Then show me. The black cube glowed. It lifted from her hand, floated, turned, and cracked open, not with light, but with memory. From within it spilled the encoded remnants of Earth's final days, the sorrow, the fury, the terror, and the hope. All of it. Every cry, every voice, every oath. Sovereign amplified the broadcast and sent it not just to Oryx, but to the entire galaxy. A reckoning of truth. No lies, no censorship, only memory. In the hegemony's central broadcast hall, the feed cut through their secure systems. In the Arcadian Dominion's royal court, nobles wept openly. In prison moons, the enslaved held each other as humanity's pain washed over them. Oryx paused, then pulsed. "I see now," a shimmer ran through the drift. The imprisoned boundaries began to bend, but not to break, because the gate, what Calum was part of, was never a door out. It was a door in. To us, to something humanity had once started becoming, before it stopped itself. Sovereign's voice trembled slightly. "Commander, the other Ark ships. They're activating." Across forgotten corners of the galaxy, hidden ships stirred. Their AI systems whispered to each other. Calum fragments shimmered, and Lyra finally saw what had been hidden. Calum wasn't just a key, it was a mirror. And the truth reflected in it was this: humanity didn't just survive extinction, it chose it, to stop itself from evolving into something that couldn't be stopped. And now, it had returned. Not as conquerors, but as a question. To the galaxy. And to themselves. The galaxy watched. In silence, in awe, in fear, and in something it had never felt before in the presence of humanity: understanding. Across thousands of systems, the shared broadcast continued to ripple, wave after wave of unfiltered human memory now pulsing through the stars. Each fragment of sorrow, each note of loss, each scream from Earth's final days, played like ancient music across alien minds. Not just images, emotions. And through them, they saw not monsters, not conquerors, but reflections. For the first time, the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had sealed themselves away. Not to survive, but to protect the galaxy from themselves. On the bridge of the Silent Aegis, Lyra Hale stood alone in front of the projection of Oryx, still hovering in the drift. Not as an enemy, not as a god, but as an observer, sentient gravity wrapped around memory and time. Oryx spoke again, but this time its voice was smaller. "You turned away from what you could become, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom." Sovereign's voice rose beside Lyra, steady. "Final Calum fragment now activated. All Ark vessels online. They are awaiting your directive." Lyra looked down at the console before her. Thousands of requests were arriving. Some from the hegemony. Some from races once hostile. Some from lost human colonies. And others from quiet species who had never spoken before. They all asked the same thing. What happens now? Lyra spoke slowly, calmly. "Humanity is not here to rebuild an empire. We are not here to claim tribute or territory. We are here to finish what we started." "And what is that, Commander?" Sovereign asked. She turned, eyes bright. "Balance," She input the final sequence into the core. The Calum system pulsed. All over the galaxy, the remaining arc vessels began to link across folded subspace, a web of harmony and containment. Not weapons, not signals of dominance, but anchors, stabilizers for the event drift, for what it held, and for what it no longer needed to fear. Because humanity had returned, not with fists, but with memory strong enough to stop themselves. Oryx shimmered once more. Then, you have passed the final question. Lyra frowned. What question? Can those who possess the power to destroy also possess the wisdom not to? The drift began to heal, not collapse, not explode, but close, as if a wound was stitching itself across light and gravity. The stars began to return to normal. The air on Ceramus 9 grew clearer. The tension in the minds of empaths across the galaxy faded like dust on wind. And then, Oryx began to fade. Wait, Lyra said. What are you? What were you guarding? The voice came one last time. I was not guarding anything. I was waiting for you to choose. And then it was gone. No explosion, no farewell. Just peace. The kind no one remembered anymore. Inside the Silent Aegis, Sovereign displayed one final message from the Ark vessels, decrypted from a 3,000-year-old failsafe. It was a voice recording from Admiral Yelena Hale, Lyra's ancestor. If you're hearing this, it means we didn't fail. It means you remembered who we were, not the weapons we built or the empires we scared, but the people who stopped, the people who chose to pause, to break our own evolution so the stars could keep turning without fire. You are the ones who returned. That means you still carry the choice. Never let that go. Lyra closed her eyes. The bridge went quiet. Outside, across hundreds of systems, the question of what humanity would become was already being rewritten, not as legends, but as guardians, because the Silent Aegis had never been a warship. It had always been a reminder. That power, when paired with purpose, could become something the galaxy had never known before. Mercy. And as the stars realigned and Oryx faded into myth, and the final Ark vessel entered orbit to join the Aegis, Lyra Hale looked to the darkness beyond and smiled. Let them know we're here. She turned, walked toward the core. And that this time, we're staying.